Welcome to 1189, an online Bible commentary. My name is Tyler Marston, and today we're taking a look at Exodus chapter 8. So God has commanded Moses and Aaron to lead the people of Israel out of slavery. And he told them that they would do this by politely asking Pharaoh to leave and to worship their God on a journey into the wilderness. However, God also said that Pharaoh would only let them go under compulsion. He's performed the first plague of those compulsions, but it hasn't convinced Pharaoh and it hasn't changed his mind. And as we look at the next plagues, we see step by step how Pharaoh begins to break down a little. But ultimately, he's stubborn and he refuses to let the people go. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, 'Thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. But if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite your whole territory with frogs. The Nile will swarm with frogs, which will come up and go into your house and into your bedroom and on your bed and into the houses of your servants and on your people, into your ovens and into your kneading bowls. So the frogs will come up on you and your people and all your servants.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, over the streams, and over the pools, and make frogs come upon the land of Egypt.' So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt." So the second plague of Egypt is that of frogs. God is sending all of these frogs out of the Nile and out of every water source in Egypt. And they all end up in the houses and even beds and kitchens of the Egyptians. According to Rice University, this parallels the Egyptian goddess Hecate. She was the goddess of water and fertility, and she had the head of a frog. Using this plague in this way shows God's sovereignty over the false god Hecate. The magicians did the same with their magic arts, making frogs come up on the land of Egypt. Now, however, just like the staffs turning into serpents and the Nile turning into blood, Pharaoh's magicians and sorcerers are able to replicate this plague of frogs. But as we look at the next verses, it seems like they can't make them go away. That might be another slight towards their goddess of renewal. Pharaoh has to end up asking the God of Israel, the Yahweh God, to get rid of the plague. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, "Entreat the Lord that he may remove the frogs from me and my people, and I will let the people go, that they may sacrifice to the Lord." Moses said to Pharaoh, "The honor is yours to tell me. When shall I entreat for you and your servants and for your people that the frogs be destroyed from you and your houses, that they may be left only in the Nile?" Then he said, "Tomorrow." So he said, "May it be done according to your word, that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will depart from you and your houses and your servants and your people, and they will be left only in the Nile." Then Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried to the Lord concerning the frogs which he had inflicted upon Pharaoh. The Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, the courts, and the fields. So they piled them in heaps, and the land became foul. Pharaoh pleads with Moses, "Get rid of these frogs tomorrow." And it happens by Yahweh's power and his power alone. Now it happens exactly according to Moses' words, and this should be sufficient enough evidence to see that the God of Israel is not one to be taunted. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. Pharaoh continues to harden his own heart. Remember, that's willful disobedience towards God. And God reminds Moses that that's exactly what he said Pharaoh would do. But Pharaoh still doesn't let the people go. He's rebelling against Israel's God, who has already made himself so evident. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the earth, that it may become gnats all through the land of Egypt." They did so, and Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff and struck the dust of the earth, and there were gnats on man and beast. All the dust of the earth became gnats through all the land of Egypt. The magicians tried with their secret arts to bring forth gnats, but they could not. So there were gnats on man and beast. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord had said. The third plague is turning the dust of the earth into gnats, sometimes translated as lice. And this would target Geb, the Egyptian god of the earth, who also controlled all of the dust on the earth. Now this time the magicians, they can't replicate the plague, and they specifically go to Pharaoh and say, hey, there's some powerful stuff going on here. Of course though, Pharaoh doesn't listen. He's still willfully disobedient. Now the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning and present yourself before Pharaoh as he comes out of the water, and say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you do not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies on you, and on your servants, and on your people, and into your houses. And the houses of the Egyptians will be full of swarms of flies, and also on the ground on which they dwell. But on that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people are living, so that no swarms of flies will be there, in order that you may know that I, the Lord, am in the midst of the land. I will put a division between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign will occur. And then the Lord did so. And there came great swarms of flies into the house of Pharaoh and the houses of the servants, and the land was laid waste because of the swarms of flies in all the land of Egypt. The fourth plague is that of flies, swarms of them in the houses of the Egyptians. But interestingly though, God sets up a boundary and does not allow the flies to come into the houses of the Israelite slaves who are living in Goshen. He says that this is going to clearly mark who is a true follower of God and who is not. And this plague mocks the Egyptian god Khepri, the god of creation and rebirth, who had the head of a fly. Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, go, sacrifice to your God within the land. But Moses said, it is not right to do so, for we will sacrifice to the Lord our God what is an abomination to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice what is an abomination to the Egyptians before their eyes, will they not then stone us? We must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he commands us. Right? And so we see Pharaoh begin to break down a little bit after this plague. He says, fine, you can make a sacrifice to God, but you have to do it here in the land of Egypt. Now, obviously, that's not going to work for the Israelites. They can't escape slavery if they never leave Egypt. And so Moses justifies the necessity of the 3-day journey into the wilderness. He says that their sacrifice would be so offensive to the Egyptians that they'd be at risk of getting stoned to death. Pharaoh said, I will let you go that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not go very far away. Make supplication for me. Then Moses said, behold, I am going out from you, and I shall make supplication to the Lord that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow. Only do not let Pharaoh deal deceitfully again in not letting the people go to sacrifice to the Lord. Now, unbelievably here, Pharaoh haggles and negotiates with Moses and gives in. The Israelites are permitted to go outside the land of Egypt and sacrifice to the Lord their God, just like Moses has been saying, creating a cover for them to escape slavery. Pharaoh says that the only stipulations is so long as they don't go too far and that the swarms of flies are taken away. Now this is great news, right? The Israelites should be able to escape captivity here. But Moses even realized here that Pharaoh more than likely is going to go back on his word, just like he already has in the past. He begs Pharaoh to stay true to his promise and goes to entreat to the Lord to take the flies away. So Moses went out from Pharaoh and made supplication to the Lord. The Lord did as Moses asked and removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. Not one remained. But Pharaoh hardened his heart, this time also, and he did not let the people go. Once again, when he gets what he wants, Pharaoh completely abandons God's plan. He again hardens his heart and refuses to let the Israelites leave. This is how committed to abusing and oppressing people he is. This chapter really highlights how stubborn Pharaoh is and how he doesn't keep his word. He starts to give in, but only a little. And he's willing to negotiate, but as soon as the plague ends, he goes back on his word. Even when his people are suffering and his culture and his gods are being mocked, Pharaoh's still top priority is to make sure that the Israelites suffer. And he's also concerned with making sure that nobody sees him as weak. Pharaoh's pride and stubbornness and dishonesty are obviously bad traits to have. But if we're not careful, those things can creep into our lives too, and we can start ending up acting like little pharaohs over our spheres of influences, over our families, at our places of work. To avoid that, the most important thing is to listen to God's instructions and to follow them, right? To acknowledge when He's moving, to keep our promises and humble ourselves. When we do those things, we begin to align ourselves with God. We look more like God, we act more like God, we reflect His image back to the world, and that's what all of this is about. Thanks for watching 1189. I hope you have a good day, and God bless.